The plants keeping entire generations alive through droughts, wars, and famines are sitting ignored in backyards and vacant lots across America right now. Somewhere between the supermarket takeover and the chemical farming revolution, we stopped asking why our grandparents kept certain plants growing year after year, decade after decade. We stopped noticing that those plants asked for nothing and gave back everything season after season without fail. This video gives that back. 20 perennial vegetables. Plant them once. Feed yourself and your family forever. Before we reach number 17, a wild leafy green that Roman soldiers carried across Europe because it stopped bleeding wounds in the field and was worth more than silver in certain trade routes, pay close attention. Because it still grows wild across most of the United States and almost nobody recognizes it. And stay until number 20. Because the final plant on this list was eaten by every major civilization on Earth for over 5,000 years, and then one industry quietly made sure you forgot its name entirely. If you want to be part of the group that chooses to remember what the modern world decided to erase, hit subscribe right now. You belong here. Here are 20 perennial vegetables you plant once, harvest forever, ranked from remarkable to absolutely unforgettable. Number 1. Asparagus. The ancient Egyptians were cultivating asparagus as far back as 3000 BC. They called it a sacred plant, depicted it in hieroglyphics, and offered it to their gods. Ancient Rome's Emperor Augustus loved it so much he reportedly organized military campaigns timed to the asparagus harvest. That is not legend, it is documented Roman history. When industrial farming took hold in the 20th century, asparagus was pushed aside because it takes 3 years before its first harvest. Corporate agriculture runs on quick turnovers. Patience was made inconvenient, and this ancient crop quietly disappeared from most American home gardens. Studies show asparagus contains high concentrations of folate, vitamin K, and a prebiotic fiber called inulin that research confirms supports healthy gut bacteria balance. Documented evidence also indicates powerful antioxidant compounds called saponins that have been studied for their anti-inflammatory properties. Roman physicians used asparagus root boiled in wine as a treatment for kidney and urinary tract complaints. Dry the roots, steep in hot water for 15 minutes, and you have a preparation that traditional herbalists have used for over 2,000 years for water retention. Asparagus fern berries, the small red berries that appear on mature plants, are toxic. Keep children and pets away. The berries look harmless and are easily confused with harmless garden plants. This plant outlived every empire that discovered it and is still waiting patiently in the ground for you to stop ignoring it. Number 2. Rhubarb. Chinese herbalists were using rhubarb root as medicine over 4,000 years ago. The Tang dynasty, dating to roughly 600 AD, recorded rhubarb root as one of the most important herbs in their entire pharmacological system. Marco Polo brought it westward in the 1200s, and for a time in Europe, rhubarb was worth more than cinnamon and more than opium by weight. Once sugar became cheap and plentiful in the 1800s, rhubarb's role shifted almost entirely to pie filling. Its medicinal history was stripped away. By the 20th century, it had been reduced to a quaint grandmother's garden plant, quirky, seasonal, misunderstood. Research confirms rhubarb root contains compounds called anthraquinones that have been extensively studied for their documented effects on digestive regulation. Studies show rhubarb also contains still beans, the same category of compounds found in red grapes, which have been researched for anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. In traditional Chinese medicine, dried rhubarb root called dahuang was combined with honey and used for digestive complaints. A small piece of dried root steeped in water for 10 minutes produces what Chinese physicians used as a digestive aid for centuries. The leaves are toxic. Not mildly irritating, genuinely toxic, containing high concentrations of oxalic acid. Never eat rhubarb leaves. Never cook them. This is the most important safety rule with this plant, and many people do not know it. We spent decades turning a 4,000-year-old medicine into a pie ingredient and then forgot it was ever anything more. Number 3. Sorrel. French and English cottage gardens kept sorrel as a kitchen staple from at least the Middle Ages. The ancient Greeks used it before that, calling it oxalis, meaning sour, and treating it as both a food and a digestive aid. By the 1600s, French cuisine had elevated sorrel soup to fine dining status, and every peasant garden across Europe kept at least one sorrel patch permanently in the ground. Processed food culture arrived, and lemon juice replaced sorrel's tang. Convenience won. The fresh, sharp, lemony green that once defined spring cooking in millions of American households simply stopped being planted. Most people under 50 have never tasted it. Studies show sorrel is rich in vitamin C, historically critical for preventing scurvy, and contains notable concentrations of iron and magnesium. Research also confirms antioxidant flavonoids, including quercetin, which documented evidence links to anti-inflammatory pathways in the body. Chop fresh sorrel leaves and add them directly to soups or egg dishes. The natural acidity means no lemon is needed. Traditional French cuisine used sorrel pureed with butter as a sauce for fish, simple, immediate, and still one of the most underrated flavor combinations in cooking. Your grandmother had a name for this. She kept it in her kitchen garden every spring. We forgot to ask her why. Number 4. Walking onion, Egyptian walking onion. The walking onion, known scientifically as Allium proliferum, has been cultivated since at least ancient Egypt, which is where it gets one of its common names. Native American tribes across the Great Plains also used wild onion species extensively, and early American settlers maintained walking onions in permanent garden beds because they required zero maintenance across decades. Commercial onion farming standardized a single bulb type for mass production and storage. The walking onion, which propagates itself by bending its stalks to the ground and planting its own topsets, had no place in industrial agriculture's assembly line model. It was retired from public consciousness almost entirely by the mid-20th century. Research confirms onions in the Allium genus contain quercetin and sulfur compounds that studies link to cardiovascular support, including documented effects on blood pressure regulation and platelet aggregation. Allicin, present throughout the Allium family, has been extensively studied for its antimicrobial properties. Every part of the walking onion is edible. The green stalks replace scallions. The small topset bulbs pickle perfectly in vinegar. The underground bulb functions exactly like a standard onion. One plant placed in your garden in spring will, without any help from you, walk itself across the bed and multiply every single year. Most Americans don't know this plant exists and has been quietly planting itself and feeding families on this continent for centuries. Number 5. Globe artichoke. Ancient Greeks and Romans both revered the artichoke. The Romans called it carduus and fed it to nobility as a luxury food and digestive tonic. It spread from the Mediterranean into European courts and arrived in America when French settlers brought it to Louisiana in the 1700s. Thomas Jefferson grew it at Monticello, noting it in his garden journals as a perennial he intended to keep permanently. The artichoke survived modern agriculture better than most perennials on this list, but its medicinal history has been almost entirely erased from popular knowledge. Most Americans know it only as a steamed appetizer, not as a plant with a serious research record reaching back to Greco-Roman medicine. Studies show artichoke leaf extract contains cynarin and silymarin-related compounds that research confirms support liver cell regeneration and bile production. Documented evidence from multiple clinical trials indicates significant reductions in total cholesterol markers in participants consuming standardized artichoke leaf extract. Traditional European herbalists prepared artichoke leaf tea, not the edible flower head, but the mature leaves, as a liver tonic and digestive bitter. Steep 2 to 3 large dried artichoke leaves in hot water for 15 minutes. It is bitter. That bitterness is the medicine working. People with gallstones or bile duct obstruction should avoid medicinal quantities of artichoke leaf. The bile-stimulating effect that makes it therapeutic in healthy individuals can trigger serious pain episodes in people with existing gallbladder conditions. Thomas Jefferson grew this plant permanently at Monticello, and then 2 centuries later, it ended up as a steamed side dish with mayonnaise, and nobody asked what happened. Number 6. Lovage. Lovage, Levisticum officinale, was a cornerstone of medieval European monastery gardens from at least the 9th century. Benedictine monks cultivated it throughout the Holy Roman Empire, both as a food and as medicine. Ancient Greek physicians Dioscorides and Galen both wrote about it in their medical texts in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, recommending it for digestive and urinary complaints. Lovage tastes powerfully of celery, so powerfully that when hybrid celery became widely available in the 20th century, lovage became unnecessary to the commercial food industry almost overnight. It vanished from mainstream kitchen knowledge within a single generation. Research confirms lovage contains phthalides, the same volatile compounds studied in celery for their documented effects on smooth muscle relaxation and blood pressure. Studies also show significant levels of quercetin and apigenin, both extensively researched for anti-inflammatory activity. Medieval herbalists added lovage leaves to broths as a digestive stimulant. The stems are hollow and make natural straws. Early English pubs used them for drinks, which is likely where the British tradition of celery in Bloody Mary's Atesh. One plant grows 5 to 7 feet tall and produces enough leaf throughout summer to dry and use all winter. A plant used by Greek physicians, cultivated by medieval monks, and recorded in monastery records across 1,000 years of history, replaced by a grocery store bunch of celery. Number 7. Horseradish. Horseradish has been cultivated since at least 1500 BC, documented in Egyptian records and identified by researchers as one of the al-Passover bitter herbs specified in early Hebrew religious texts. Ancient Greek athletes ate it as a strengthening food. It spread across Europe with the Roman Empire and was considered a universal medicine by Germanic and Slavic peoples throughout the early Middle Ages. Commercial condiment production turned horseradish into a jarred table sauce and stripped away all recognition of its medicinal history. The plant itself, which spreads aggressively and is nearly impossible to kill, became a nuisance in modern manicured gardens instead of the survival perennial it once was. Studies show horseradish contains glucosinolates, particularly sinigrin, that research confirms have documented antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. When the root is grated, an enzyme reaction produces allyl isothiocyanate, a compound studied for its potential antibacterial effects and its documented ability to stimulate sinus drainage. Grate fresh horseradish root, mix with apple cider vinegar and a pinch of salt, and you have what traditional European herbalists called a sinus and respiratory tonic. 18th century physicians in Germany and Austria used fresh horseradish poultices applied to the chest for upper respiratory complaints, a practice documented in regional medical texts. Applied directly to skin, horseradish root can cause blistering. Never apply raw root poultice to bare skin without a cloth barrier. Ingesting large quantities can cause vomiting and gastric irritation. Therapeutic uses should be in small, measured amounts. This plant is mentioned in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, in ancient Greek athletic records, and in early Hebrew scripture, and today it lives in a jar next to the ketchup. Number 8. Sea kale. Sea kale Cram marittima grows wild along European Atlantic coastlines and has been harvested by coastal communities since prehistoric times. By the early 1800s, it had become a fashionable forced vegetable on the dinner tables of English country estates. Thomas Jefferson imported sea kale seeds in 1821 and planted it at Monticello, noting in correspondence that he expected it to become a staple American vegetable. Jefferson's prediction did not come true. The vegetable never scaled commercially. Forcing the process of blanching it under pots to produce tender, white shoots required individual attention that mass production could not accommodate. By the early 1900s, it had nearly vanished from the American food landscape entirely. Research confirms sea kale is rich in vitamin C and glucosinolates, the sulfur compounds studied extensively across the Brassica family for their documented effects on cellular detoxification pathways. Studies also show meaningful concentrations of calcium, iron, and potassium in the edible shoots. Cover emerging spring shoots with an upturned pot or bucket for 3 to 4 weeks. The blanched white shoots that emerge are tender, slightly sweet, and taste like a cross between asparagus and cabbage. Steam them and serve with butter, exactly as English aristocrats ate them 200 years ago. Thomas Jefferson tried to bring this to American tables in 1821. 2 centuries later, it remains almost completely unknown. That is not an accident of nature, it is an accident of commerce. Number 9. Turkish rocket. Turkish rocket Bunyas orientalis aided in the steppe and mountain regions of Western Asia and Eastern Europe, where nomadic Turkic and Central Asian peoples used it as a famine food and a spring tonic vegetable as far back as the 5th and 6th centuries AD. It arrived in Western Europe with traders and was recorded in German and Eastern European folk medicine texts by the 17th century. Turkish rocket fell off the food map as Western European and American markets consolidated around a narrow set of commercially viable vegetables. Its deeply bitter flavor, similar to arugula but more intense, had no market in the mild vegetable-obsessed culture of 20th century America. Studies show Turkish rocket contains glucosinolates and phenolic compounds that research confirms have documented antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. The bitter compounds shared across the Brassica family are being studied for their potential role in supporting the liver's detoxification enzyme systems. Young leaves harvested in early spring are the mildest. Blanch them once in boiling water to reduce bitterness, then sauté with olive oil and garlic. Central Asian traditional cooks mix the leaves with yogurt and dried herbs of preparation that neutralizes the bitterness and creates a complex, deeply flavored side dish. Famine survivors across Central Asia knew this plant by name. We replaced it with iceberg lettuce. Number 10. Ostrich fern fiddleheads. Indigenous peoples of northeastern North America, including the Abenaki, Maliseet, and Mi'kmaq nations, harvested fiddleheads from the ostrich fern as a critical spring food for thousands of years before European contact. The fern grows in river floodplains and forest edges throughout New England, Canada, and the Great Lakes region, and indigenous culinary records document its use as a spring green and a food storage ingredient. Fiddlehead knowledge was specific to communities that lived close to the land. Urbanization severed that connection. Today, most Americans who live within walking distance of a fiddlehead-producing fern cannot identify one. The knowledge simply was not passed down through the school system or food industry. Research confirms fiddleheads are high in omega-3 fatty acids unusual for a vegetable, as well as vitamin C, iron, and potassium. Studies show meaningful antioxidant content comparable to blueberries by some measurements. Documented evidence also identifies niacin and riboflavin at levels significant for a foraged wild food. Harvest fiddleheads when the coiled frond is no taller than 2 inches and the papery brown husk still clings to it. Boil or steam for at least 10 minutes before eating. This is non-negotiable. Sauté with butter, garlic, and a squeeze of lemon. The flavor is grassy, slightly nutty, and unmistakably spring. This is critical. Fiddleheads must be cooked. Raw fiddleheads contain toxins that cause severe gastrointestinal illness. Multiple documented illness outbreaks in the U.S. and Canada have been traced to undercooked fiddleheads. Always boil or steam for a full 10 minutes before any other preparation. Indigenous peoples on this continent ate this plant for thousands of years as a spring survival food, and today most people living within a mile of a fiddlehead patch would walk right past it. Number 11. Good King Henry. Good King Henry Chenopodium bonus henricus was a staple vegetable across medieval Europe from at least the 12th century. English peasants relied on it as a year-round green. Germanic and Scandinavian farmers planted it in permanent beds and harvested it continuously across decades. The name Good King Henry has nothing to do with royalty. It likely derives from an old Germanic plant name, Heinrich, which referred to benevolent or beneficial wild plants. Spinach introduced into European cultivation in the 16th century proved faster growing, milder in flavor, and more commercially scalable than Good King Henry. Within 200 years, this ancient perennial was functionally replaced by an annual crop that required replanting every season. The older, more durable plant was simply abandoned. Studies show Good King Henry is rich in iron, historically important in vegetable-based diets, as well as significant levels of vitamins A and C. Research confirms oxalic acid is present, which can bind calcium in high quantities. Documented evidence also identifies saponins in the seeds, which historical accounts suggest were used as a mild soap substitute in water-scarce environments. Use young leaves exactly as you would spinach raw in salads, wilted in soups, or sautéed. The shoots that emerge in very early spring can be eaten like asparagus, steamed, and served with butter. One plant established correctly will produce harvestable greens for 10 to 15 years without replanting. We replaced a plant that fed European peasants for 700 years with a faster annual crop, and then called the result progress. Number 12. 9-star perennial broccoli. Perennial broccoli varieties were cultivated in Mediterranean Europe long before annual broccoli was standardized for commercial production. Regional farmers in Italy, France, and England maintained clumps of perennial broccoli in their kitchen gardens through the 1700s and 1800s, harvesting small white curds similar in appearance to cauliflower from the same plants year after year for up to a decade. Annual commercial broccoli varieties were developed in the early 20th century for uniformity, predictability, and machine harvesting. 9-star perennial broccoli produces multiple smaller heads rather than one large marketable crown, useless for industrial production. It was never given shelf space at the grocery store, so it was never planted in American gardens, and within 2 generations it was functionally unknown. Research confirms cruciferous vegetables in the Brassica family contain glucosinolates that studies link to the activation of the body's own antioxidant enzyme systems. Specifically, the compound sulforaphane abundant across broccoli varieties has been among the most extensively researched plant compounds of the last 30 years, with documented evidence from multiple institutions examining its role in cellular health pathways. The small white heads harvest in early spring before most garden vegetables are even started. Steam or roast them. The flavor is milder and sweeter than standard broccoli. Cut the heads and leave the plant side shoots continue producing secondary heads throughout the season. One plant can yield harvests for 7 to 10 years. We had a vegetable that produced food for a decade from single planting. We replaced it with a crop you have to buy seeds for every spring. Ask yourself why. Number 13. Chinese artichoke croissants. Stachys affinis, known as croissants or Chinese artichoke, has been cultivated in northern China and Japan for over 1,000 years. Japanese farmers called them pierogi and prepared them as a New Year's delicacy, symbolizing longevity because of the spiral, caterpillar-like shape of the tubers. They arrived in France in 1882, were briefly fashionable in European haute cuisine, and then nearly completely vanished from Western cultivation within 50 years. Croissants are difficult to peel and cannot be mechanically processed too, disqualifying characteristics for industrial food production. Despite the fact that they are perennial, frost-hardy, and completely self-maintaining, they offer nothing to commercial agriculture. So commercial agriculture offered nothing back. They were erased from the American food landscape before most people alive today were born. Research confirms croissants contain stachyose, a prebiotic oligosaccharide that studies show selectively feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Documented evidence also identifies betaine and significant levels of phosphorus and zinc. Traditional Chinese medicine classified them as a qi tonifying food, used specifically to support energy and cognitive function in elderly patients. Scrub croissants in a cloth with coarse salt to clean the crevices without peeling. Blanch for 3 minutes, then sauté in butter with fresh herbs. The flavor is delicate, nutty, and slightly sweet, closer to water chestnuts than to Jerusalem artichoke. Plant the tubers in fall and harvest the following autumn. Leave some in the ground, and they will return every year without help. Japanese families ate these tubers for 1,000 years as a symbol of longevity, and they are almost completely unknown in the country that claims to lead the world in food innovation. Number 14. Water celery Mitsuba. Mitsuba cryptotinea japonica, also called Japanese parsley or water celery, has been cultivated in Japan, China, and Korea for over 2,000 years. Chinese herbal records from a Han Dynasty period, roughly 200 BC to 200 AD, document its use as both a culinary herb and a medicine for what physicians then described as stagnant digestion and nervous agitation. In Japan, it became a fixture of traditional haute cuisine, appearing in soups, noodle dishes, and ceremonial foods. Mitsuba never crossed successfully into Western culinary culture. Without a strong immigrant community advocating for it, and without any commercial food company choosing to market it, it remained invisible to the mainstream American food system. Today, it is almost entirely absent from American gardens, despite growing vigorously in shade, the one condition most American backyards have in abundance. Studies show Mitsuba contains isoquercetin, a form of quercetin, and various flavonoids that research has examined for anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. Traditional Chinese medicine documented uses for calming nervous system irritation, and modern research has begun identifying active compounds in related species that show interactions with GABA-related pathways, though this research remains early stage. Add fresh Mitsuba to miso soup in the final 30 seconds of cooking. It wilts instantly and should never be overcooked. The flavor is like parsley crossed with celery, but cleaner and more aromatic. Use raw leaves as a garnish for any broth-based dish. It grows so prolifically in partial shade that once established, most gardeners find themselves giving it away. Stop for a second. If you've been paying attention, you may have started noticing something. These plants were not forgotten randomly. They were not lost to time the way languages or dances sometimes are. They were replaced, every single one of them, by something that someone could patent, bottle, standardize, or sell. The pattern is not subtle. It is consistent. Here is the comment question for today. Tell me in the comments which vegetable on this list shocked you the most and why. Every comment is a record. Every person who shares this knowledge keeps it from disappearing entirely. I read every single one. Now back to the list, because the final 6 are the ones that will stay with you the longest. Number 15. Skirret. Skirret siam was one of the most prized root vegetables in Europe from the Roman period through the 1600s. Roman author Pliny the Elder wrote about it in the 1st century AD, and Emperor Tiberius reportedly demanded it as tribute from Germanic territories. It was a standard kitchen garden vegetable in England and France through the 17th century, appearing in cookbooks alongside carrots and parsnips as an everyday staple. The potato arrived from South America in the 1500s and proved higher yielding, easier to store, and more filling than skirret. Within a century of the potato's European adoption, skirret had been almost entirely displaced. By 1700, it was already becoming a curiosity. By 1900, most people in Europe had never heard of it. Research confirms skirret roots are high in inulin, the prebiotic fiber, also found in chicory and Jerusalem artichoke, that studies show selectively nourishes beneficial gut bacteria. Documented evidence also identifies meaningful levels of vitamin C and potassium in the edible roots. Boil or roast the thin, clustered roots whole. The flavor is sweet, slightly spicy, and described by historical sources as tasting of carrot and parsnip combined. Plant the seeds in early spring. By fall, you have a cluster of thin white roots ready to harvest. Leave the root crown in the ground and it returns every year. Emperor Tiberius demanded this plant as tribute from conquered nations, and today most Americans couldn't pick it out of a garden catalog. Number 16. Ramps wild leek. Allium tricoccum ramps, or wild leeks, are native to eastern North America and were a critical spring food for Cherokee, Iroquois, and numerous other eastern woodlands peoples for thousands of years before European contact. Early European settlers who survived their first harsh winters often credited ramps as the food that prevented scurvy in late winter and early spring when no other fresh vegetables were available. When the commercial food system made fresh vegetables available year-round, the desperate urgency of finding early spring greens disappeared. Ramps became a seasonal specialty food, expensive at farmers markets, unfamiliar to most grocery shoppers. Instead of the spring survival vegetable, they once were for every person who lived close to eastern forest land. Studies show ramps contain high concentrations of allicin and other organosulfur compounds that research confirms have documented antimicrobial and cardiovascular effects consistent with the broader allium family. Ramps also contain among the highest vitamin C concentrations of any wild edible plant native to North America, which explains their documented historical role in preventing scurvy. Sauté ramps whole in butter bulb, stem, and leaf for about 4 minutes. The flavor is intense garlic onion with a wild, earthy edge that cultivated alliums do not produce. Indigenous preparation methods included eating them raw as a spring tonic, combined with bear fat and dried corn in early spring feasts. Plant bulbs in a shaded woodland area in fall. They are slow to establish but will naturalize and spread independently over time. Ramps have a dangerous look-alike. Lily of the valley, Convallaria majalis, grows in similar habitat and looks nearly identical to ramp leaves before flowering. Lily of the valley is highly toxic. Always confirm identity by crushing a leaf and smelling it. Ramps smell strongly of garlic and onion. Lily of the valley has no onion smell whatsoever. If there is no smell, do not eat it. American colonists survived their first winters on this plant. That is not metaphor, it is historical record. Number 17. Yarrow. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium, takes its Latin name from Achilles, who, according to Greek legend, used it to stanch the bleeding wounds of his soldiers during the Trojan War. Archaeological pollen analysis from a Neanderthal burial site in Shanidar Cave, Iraq, dating to roughly 60,000 years ago, found yarrow among the plants placed with the body, suggesting intentional medicinal use predating modern human civilization as we understand it. Roman legions carried it across Europe as a field medicine. Pharmaceutical companies developed synthetic hemostatic and anti-inflammatory agents in the mid-20th century. Yarrow, which could not be patented and grew wild across most of the northern hemisphere for free, had no place in the commercial medical economy. Its medicinal history was not disproved, it was simply made irrelevant to a system that required profit at every step. Studies show yarrow contains achillin and achillisin sesquiterpene lactones that research confirms have documented anti-inflammatory activity. Other compounds include flavonoids, alkaloids, and salicylic acid derivatives. Documented evidence from ethnobotanical research identifies consistent use across dozens of independent cultures worldwide for wound treatment, fever management, and digestive complaints, an unlikely coincidence if the plant had no effect. Pack a clean handful of fresh yarrow leaves directly against a minor cut or abrasion. Hold it in place for 5 minutes. Traditional field medicine across dozens of cultures use this preparation, and it is the most immediate and visceral demonstration of plant medicine many people ever experience. For internal use, Yarrow leaf tea, dried leaves steeped for 10 minutes, was used by European herbalists for fever and digestive complaints. Yarrow can cause allergic reactions in people sensitive to plants in the Asteraceae family. Ragweed, chrysanthemums, and marigolds belong to the same family. Pregnant women should not use yarrow medicinally, as it has documented uterine-stimulating compounds. Do not confuse wild yarrow with poison hemlock, which grows in similar roadside habitats. Hemlock has purple spotted hollow stems. Yarrow stems are solid and covered in fine white hairs. Archaeological evidence suggests humans were using this plant as medicine 60,000 years before the first pharmacy opened. The pharmacy did not replace it, it replaced the pharmacy. Number 18. Hopnus American groundnut. Apis americana, called hopnus by the Lenape people and groundnut by early colonists, was a primary food source for indigenous peoples across the eastern half of North America for thousands of years. The Pilgrims at Plymouth survived their first winter largely because the Wampanoag people introduced them to hopnus, which grows wild in moist forest edges and produces clusters of small, protein-rich tubers along underground runners. This is one of the most historically significant plants on this entire list. European colonists attempted to commercialize hopnus in the early 1800s, but the tubers proved difficult to harvest mechanically and took longer to mature than the potato. The commercial opportunity was judged insufficient. The plant that saved the Owl colonists was classified as an agricultural dead end and abandoned, erased from American culinary identity within a few generations of the people it had fed for millennia. Research confirms hopnus tubers contain approximately 3 times more protein than the potato by dry weight, a nutritional profile unique among temperate climate root vegetables. Studies show meaningful concentrations of genistein, a plant isoflavone that documented evidence from multiple research institutions has studied extensively for its interactions with estrogenic pathways and its potential role in bone density support. Boil or roast hopnus tubers exactly as you would small potatoes. The flavor is slightly sweet, nutty, and starchy, better than potato by most historical accounts that compared them directly. The vine also produces edible beans in fall. Plant established root sections in moist soil near a fence or trellis. They are slow to establish but will naturalize and spread across years, requiring no intervention. A small percentage of people experience digestive discomfort from hopnus, similar to the reaction some people have to Jerusalem artichoke. This is related to the oligosaccharide content. Start with small amounts and allow your digestive system to adjust. Individuals with soy allergies should exercise caution given the isoflavone content. The plant that kept the Pilgrims alive through their first American winter was classified as commercially unviable and forgotten within 2 generations. That is not history. That is a choice. Number 19. Scorzonera. Scorzonera hispanica black salsify was cultivated in medieval Spain and Italy as both a vegetable and a medicine against plague and snakebite. The name derives from the Spanish word for viper, escorzon, because of its documented historical use as an antidote for snakebite venom, a use recorded in 16th-century Spanish pharmacopoeial texts. By the 1700s, it was one of the most prized root vegetables in French cuisine, appearing on aristocratic tables alongside truffles and asparagus. Scorzonera's black outer skin was considered unappealing by industrial food processors who prioritized visual uniformity. It also oxidizes rapidly when peeled, turning gray within minutes, making it incompatible with mass commercial handling. A vegetable that demanded immediate preparation and came packaged in an uninviting black skin had no future in the supermarket era. Research confirms Scorzonera is exceptionally high in inulin, among the highest concentrations of any root vegetable, making it one of the most potent prebiotic foods available from a garden. Studies show it also contains asparagine, potassium, and iron. Traditional anti-inflammatory and tonic claims are consistent with its high flavonoid content, though direct clinical research on the whole vegetable remains limited. Scrub the root under water and peel it immediately into a bowl of water with a splash of lemon juice to prevent oxidation. Roast in olive oil at high heat, it caramelizes beautifully, and the flavor becomes rich, slightly sweet, and complex. French chefs described it as tasting of oyster and artichoke combined. Plant it once, and it returns every fall to be harvested, deeper and thicker each year. Scorzonera roots must be peeled and cooked before eating in quantity. The white latex-like sap that seeps from the cut root can cause contact dermatitis in sensitive individuals. Wear kitchen gloves when peeling. Some people experience mild digestive gas from a high inulin content, similar to reactions to Jerusalem artichoke. French aristocrats paid more for this root than for most meats in the 1700s. Today it doesn't exist in a single American supermarket chain. That distance is not natural, it was engineered. Number 20. Jerusalem artichoke sunchoke. Helianthus tuberosus was cultivated by indigenous peoples across most of eastern North America for thousands of years before European contact. Tribes from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast relied on it as a staple carbohydrate. French explorer Samuel de Champlain documented it in 1605, sending tubers back to Europe, where they became an immediate sensation. Within decades, sunchoke was being grown across France, Italy, and Germany, consumed by peasants and kings alike. For a brief period in the 17th century, it was the most widely eaten root vegetable in all of Europe. And then the potato arrived from South America. The potato was higher calorie, produced more reliably, and stored better through the winter. Within 1 century, sunchoke went from most popular root vegetable in Europe to a nearly forgotten curiosity. The food industry has never looked back. Today, despite its extraordinary nutritional profile, sunchoke is nearly impossible to find in a mainstream American grocery store. Research confirms Jerusalem artichoke contains more inulin by dry weight than almost any other food on Earth, which is why it became the primary commercial source of inulin for the food supplement industry. Studies show inulin from sunchoke selectively feeds Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus species, the two most widely studied beneficial gut bacteria genera. Documented evidence from multiple clinical trials confirms measurable improvements in glycemic response and insulin sensitivity in participants consuming inulin-rich foods, with specific research on sunchoke extract showing significant reductions in post-meal blood glucose elevation. The plant also contains potassium, thiamine, and iron at levels that made it a nutritionally complete carbohydrate staple for the populations that depended on it. Plant 1 tuber in any patch of bare soil. Do not fertilize. Do not water after initial planting in most American climates. Come back in October. Dig up a harvest of dozens of tubers from single planting. Roast them in olive oil, the skin crisps, and the inside becomes sweet and almost creamy. Slice them thin and eat raw in salads like water chestnuts. Leave some tubers in the ground and you will have a harvest again next year without ever planting again. The plant spreads, feeds the pollinators with its sunflower-like flowers in late summer, and produces without any care, year after year, indefinitely. Jerusalem artichoke has earned the nickname fartichoke for a reason. The inulin content, while genuinely beneficial for gut health, is fermented rapidly by gut bacteria and produces significant gas in people who are not accustomed to it. Begin with small portions. Allow your gut microbiome 2 to 3 weeks to adjust. People with irritable bowel syndrome or those on low FODMAP diets should introduce it very gradually and monitor their response. It was the most widely eaten root vegetable in all of Europe for 50 years. Then the potato arrived, and within a century, this plant, with its extraordinary nutritional profile and its ability to grow without any help from you, was functionally erased. Every civilization that ever ate it knew something we forgot. Now you know it again. 20 plants. Thousands of years of documented human survival, and almost none of them on the shelves of your grocery store. That is not coincidence. Somewhere in the last 100 years, the measure of a food's worth shifted from how well it fed a family to how efficiently it could be grown, processed, packaged, and sold. Plants that asked nothing of you, that returned year after year, that carried ancient medicinal histories in their roots, and leaves were replaced by crops that required annual seed purchases, chemical inputs, and industrial infrastructure. The knowledge did not disappear on its own. It was made inconvenient. What you have just learned is not nostalgic. It is urgent, because these plants still exist. The seeds are still available. The ground beneath your feet is still capable of growing them. The only thing missing was the knowledge, and now you have it. Your challenge starting today: choose one plant from this list. Just one. Find the seeds or start a plant. Put it in the ground. Commit to it for 3 years. That is all. In 3 years, you will understand, in a way no video can fully teach, why every civilization that came before us treated these plants as something close to sacred. If this video changed the way you see your backyard, your grocery store, or the knowledge your grandparents carried, hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm that this kind of content matters. Comment below. Would you start with a plant you can eat immediately, or one with the most powerful history? Tell me which one you're planting first. And if you are the kind of person who believes that some knowledge is too important to lose, subscribe to Cropbound. Every video we make is one more piece of what the modern world decided you didn't need to know. The most dangerous thing the modern world ever did was convince you that someone else would always be responsible for feeding you.